We have Brian Sommer here, and Brian, suffice to say, leading enterprise analyst, decades of experience, incredibly deep knowledge, and at the same time, one of the world's most remarkable storytellers. Hey Brent, it's gone out of focus.
But I've never looked better.
So Brian, regardless of this specific thing, what's your overall thinking on what you've seen so far on these applications?
Well, I think we're at an interesting time in the software market because the usual conferences, vendors kind of saved up a year or 18 months worth of goodness that they were going to roll into a product and then dropped it all on you with a dump truck at the user conference. And I know you're thinking like, where does he come up with this language?
Do. I always think that.
But what we're hearing is, these guys are slipstreaming in a whole bunch of new advanced technologies underneath a whole pile of products. Their real focus is on extending end-to-end process kind of knowledge, and they want to drop all those advanced technologies, all the artificial intelligence, the machine learning, the big data, everything else. They're throwing it all in there, and they're not going to dump it all at once anymore. So, to some extent, some people might be listening to this and be feeling a little bit underwhelmed because we're not hearing the, super colossal giant, news. But on the other hand, I think you're missing the bigger point, realizing that structurally the market has changed and how you digest, consume, and everything else, software's changed, and the implications are going to be profound on all your business processes all the time going forward.
So do you see Oracle itself as the company itself, not just the general, let's say, the competitive market, but do you see these as let's get this into the flow because we need to get it into the flow, or these are genuine, valuable, and I realize it'll be uneven here, but genuine, valuable, and useful advances that we're able to add to the flow as it's evolving?
They're quite real kinds of things, and you're going to want them. And in fact, I had a conversation with Mr. Miranda here in the hall. I know he's talking on the other screen as we speak. Stephen, I asked him a question. I go, when people first bought packages, they bought them because they were trying to achieve some immediate process efficiencies and improved effectiveness. Then as time wore on, they've realized and computing power increased, they were able to extend that to the entirety of the organization. So we had shared service organizations crop up, and we got more productivity savings and efficiencies. Now you got guys like Oracle who want to extend to all the far ends of what constitutes a process, and that creates another round of new efficiencies that you can get a hold of. So my question to Steve is, I'm thinking 5 chess moves ahead here.
Okay.
What happens to shared service organizations? Because if all of this stuff goes in the cloud, all of the smart technology comes in there and takes care of everything for you automatically through RPA and other technologies, then all that's left is you need a few experts who can handle the anomalous transactions that pop up. And is that what shared service becomes? It's just a collection of a few smart experts who handle the odd and end stuff instead of the big efficiency problems.
So basically a collection of exceptions.
Right. As opposed to a giant factory that just crunched transactions.
Okay, well actually that goes to one of the early customer stories. Brent and I were kind of marveling over the fact that JP Morgan was handling, 10 trillion transactions a year or something like that. That's the number they used, which is, I don't even know how to process that number in terms of transactions. And again, I don't deal with that typically in what we're doing. We're operating on a more right brain focus. So,
well, that kind of reminds me. So I was having a conversation one night, eons ago. I was helping a neighbor rebuild a car engine, and he posed a question to me. He goes, "You want to know how you drive a person crazy?" And I go, "How's that?" Well, you give him $1 billion, and you tell him he has to spend it all in the next 30 days. Now I know today $1 billion doesn't go as far as it used to.
That's right.
I'm still waiting for that decacorn kind of valuation for my own business, but the point still, you're talking about trillions, and you are talking about a number that is almost beyond the ability of a normal mind to actually get their head around. I mean, we can all put it in scientific notation, but it's still kind of an abstract term for us. And yeah, the volumes are just absolutely astounding.
I don't even understand how you deal with, I don't want to call it complexity because that word gets used like overused in our universe. I mean, it is complex, but I think by now we all kind of get that. But how you deal with just the sheer volume and number as they're happening, and you're processing all of that so that it all works, because ultimately that individual, that 10 trillion transactions, is each one of them is applied to something specific, right? It goes somewhere, it comes from somewhere, it goes to something or someone, meaning and yet you're effectively taking this mass. It's like, for example, to your usual analogy, let's put it this way: if I'm seeing a tsunami rush at me, I'm not getting a glass. I don't think the right idea is to get a glass out so I can figure which part of the tsunami I can drink, right? I got to start thinking in different terms, and I don't know how to think about it, honestly.
And yet, I would tell you that what you're describing creates a forest for the trees problem in IT.
Okay.
And that the real reason companies want to take advantage of these advanced technologies is they need tools that basically help them tell them what it is I don't need to worry about.
Okay, fair enough.
And like, for example, you know, I know a bunch of the analysts here, they know that I think they take perverse pleasure in tracking where I fly and all the problems I have with it. So what I really wish is that airlines actually thought about not so much every little like tweet or whatever, but they ought to notice things like, okay, clearly Brian's having a tough day here today, and while he's stuck sitting on a plane that's not going anywhere, maybe we ought to be actually trying to find him an alternative routing so he can get home or get to the event or whatever. And instead, they're focused on stuff like, you know, let's just send him a bunch of pointless messages that irritate and piss him off.
Yeah, I get those.
Anyway, but back to the volumes, you know, this is what's really behind a lot of the Internet 4.0, or the Factory of the Future, the industrial IoT, and you know, and the manufacturing 4.0 kind of world, where we've got sensors everywhere throwing off all this information, but very little of it actually is anything that we care about. It's a lot of sensors reporting status as normal.
Right.
So we have to think about that in terms of how that applies to, you know, the old school kind of business transactions, whether they're finance, accounting, CRM, whatever. There's a bunch of noise in the channel, and that's what people aren't comfortable with yet, because they haven't thought about noise in an accounting perspective.
Right.
How about that?
Fair enough. That's actually really interesting.
In fact, I gave a keynote a couple of years ago, just before the pandemic, on big data and accounting.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, the people in that audience thought I was talking about something that it was making them as uncomfortable as you or me wearing a cheap suit. I mean, they were really bothered by how, you know, why? Because big data's it's not perfect from the accounting perspective. Right. It's got, like I said, it's got noise, it's got issues with it, and you know, I'm telling, like, I can tell you what much better way to predict your company's financial numbers. If you're in like the hospitality industry, I want to see what's changing on your TripAdvisor scores, your ratings, because a 1-star change can trigger a 12.5% movement in your revenue numbers.
Wow.
Okay. And they're like having apoplexy over stats like that because, well, it's not audited or it's whatever. And I'm going, I don't care. As a business person, I don't care about that. I care about what is it telling me. And that's the real business value there, not does it pass some GAAP or IFRS or whatever kind of standard. Anyway, sorry to ramble on.
No, that's important. Look, I have one last question though, and this. So when was the last time you came to? Then it was still open world. When was the last time you came prior to this one? 3-4 years ago.
It would have had. No, it probably would have been like 2019 or whatever the last big one they had. Yeah.
So what have you seen in Oracle's, good or bad, in Oracle's evolution from then to now?
I think probably what's interesting to me is they had done a deal to buy Micros. Remember them?
Yeah, of course.
And I thought, well, that's interesting because here's a lot of big data coming off of those point of sale devices. And I was wondering, are they going to be tying that in with like their CRM solutions and the like? That was my first thought. That was that first thought was way too uninformed. It would have been the first thought of a lesser grade analyst. How about that? You would have. You know where I'm going because you're not one of those. Okay.
You could have called me. That would be okay with it.
No, but where I'm going with this is. But since then, that really was that was more than just like a retail or a hardware play.
Right.
It was the beginning of a huge shift of focus for them to go into other sectors like the Cerner deal in healthcare and so forth.
Ecosystem.
Yeah, and I know they like talking about that ecosystem deal, but that's not going to be necessarily the end of it either.
Right. Absolutely agree.
And I think we're seeing them move, once they get the ecosystem and all these other pieces in there, then you're going to see them shift to being not a database company anymore, not an apps company, but they are going to be it's clear, they're going to be a data broker is what they're going to be all about. And that's the future of the company.
Thank you, sir. You are awesome as always. And I'll tell you what, if you're up with this, Brent and I will work out a time where we can bring you on a regular episode of CRM Playaz. You up for that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'd almost prefer to actually be in a room with you guys and talk about this sometime, even a Zoom deal, other than just send a little snarky messages in on the
That's okay.
on the chat.
No, you're on. You're
All right.
on. All right. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you much.
You're the best.
All right.
All right.